A way of understanding American independent cinema is to analyse it within the context of an auteur cinema. But what makes Damien Chazelle an auteur? To answer this, I will show how he's developed as a filmmaker, identify his influences from personal experiences and from classical Hollywood musicals, and also review the stylistic decisions that we recognise him for. I will be looking at 3 of Chazelle's feature films and use them to demonstrate that as a cinephile himself, Chazelle uses the independent cinema space to express his love for musicals, but in his own unique way.
I always loved musicals. It was all about that transition from just kind of real life to people suddenly breaking into song.
Dancing, yes, I was dancing.
So I wanted to make a movie with the means that I had, which were very limited means, but really about that transition from real life to musical number and back again. So the idea was to just do a musical, but set it in the world I knew, which was Boston, and sort of people my age in Boston, and kind of incorporate their own lives into it and shoot it kind of like a documentary, and just, you know, the way I'd been used to shooting movies.
Guy and Madeline on a park bench operates beneath the Hollywood style, according to King. Cinema-vérité is the style of filmmaking characterised by realistic, typically documentary films, which avoid artificiality and artistic effect, and are generally made with simple equipment. As the film was shot on black and white 16mm film stock, this allowed Chazelle to produce a minimalistic and tactile aesthetic with the grain in the image. Along with the handheld camera movement, the film could almost be mistaken for a documentary in the way that it appears to be capturing events authentically as they occur in real time. This effect is enhanced in part due to the film having no established or experienced actors or actresses. This is in stark contrast though to Chazelle's next film, where he adopts an altered approach to film form.
The boy in the park.
So part of the intent with Whiplash was, okay, I'm gonna write something small and focused and lean and mean and simple and about, 2 people with very clearly defined goals who are just going like this until they realize they have the same goal, basically.
Yeah, I was a jazz drummer myself, and I had a really tough teacher. So I just pulled from a lot of those experiences. It's the most personal thing I've ever written by far. So I wanted to set up these 2 characters and kind of set them against each other so that you create a sort of battle movie. And I wanted the movie to feel precise, to have a visual style that felt like J.K.'s character could have cut the movie, that it has this sort of regimented sense of tempo.
It is evident from this scene that Whiplash was very well planned out in pre-production and constructed in a very particular way by Chazelle, hence the film being shot in only 19 days. Every camera angle and frame is meticulously crafted to cut together seamlessly. In comparison, Guy and Madeline's camera angles feel much less organised, and the experience can be quite jarring when watching this scene jump around from one musician to another. The editing is also out of rhythm, which makes the scene less engaging in comparison. Whiplash is overall a sharper, more polished production, and this is evidence of a development in Chazelle as an auteur. He moves away from the cinema-vérité style and aligns himself more to classical Hollywood forms like precise framing, continuity editing, and better lighting and sound. Which leads us to his next feature, his own attempt to emulate the golden era of Hollywood musicals.
I'd actually just kind of fallen in love with musicals specifically around when I started college. Musicals themselves, I was sort of a late comer to. I think I made up for lost time once I really fell in love with Fred and Ginger and Gene Kelly. Ever since then, I've never been able to get enough of them.
Summer Sunday nights, we'd sink into our seats right as they dimmed out all the lights. A technicolor world made out of music and machine. It called me to be on that screen. and live inside each scene.
Without a nickel to my name, hopped a bus, here I came. I could be brave or just...
We were just talking early on about, wouldn't it be cool to do a musical like that, to do a big old-fashioned song and dance original musical, but in a way that feels realistic, that feels weirdly grounded, that feels like it's kind of smashing the musical into real life.
Gallagher argues that films can invoke previous eras of artistic production to burnish their own credentials and appeals. This idea can be applied to Chazelle, with his homage to classical Hollywood apparent on multiple occasions, as he leans on his inspirations to appeal to musical lovers like himself, but he still manages to keep it modern and more relevant to today's cinema goers.
To me, it was all about trying to just hone in on the emotions, because the emotions are what I think helps hook you into, helps a movie feel like it could be for any moment. And I think there's something very inspiring about the older musicals in the simplicity of their approach, kind of purity of the idea that you break in a song when you're too emotional to do anything else, and that every musical number is justified, and that, when Gene Kelly starts to dance, it's because he can't express an emotion any other way.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
That to me is like, if I had to just explain to someone what a musical is, that's how I describe it. It's walking down and on a rainy street and you're so happy and you're so in love that you just have to start dancing in the rain.
Here's to the ones who dream.
La La Land and Guy and Madeline's historical inspirations are not just a nod back to classical Hollywood musicals, but an opportunity for Chazelle to reflect on that period of cinema and put his own twist on it. Instead of the film following a classical narrative of reaching a happy conclusion, La La Land is far less hopeful by the end. It not only draws out and romanticises the best parts of living as a rising artist in LA throughout the film, but it also shows the hardships, struggles and sacrifices of that lifestyle. La La Land is a chance to celebrate the best of what classic musicals have offered the world, while showing Hollywood under an honest light that is very rarely seen in a musical of its kind. And this is one of the reasons why I consider Chazelle an auteur. He writes from his unique life experiences of relationships, being a drummer, or living in LA, and fuses this with his personal sentiment to musicals. A final common trait is Chazelle's decision to base his narratives around two main characters, whose lives are brought together by chance and consistently being drawn in and out from each other for different reasons. And this leads to how Chazelle constructs the ending to each of his films, at the pinnacle level of emotion, so much so that we are left without a definitive conclusion in all three films.
One, two, 3, 4.
It is evident that Chazelle uses the independent cinema space to express his love for musicals, but he can be considered an auteur because of what he brings to each film, a distinctive style and story from experience and sentiment.